There's a question that a lot of people have been avoiding, and the question is, what if the Trump administration simply doesn't listen to the Supreme Court? I believe we may be about to find out. I don't think our systems are really ready for what might be coming here. And the thing is that it's already kind of happening. Like federal judges have issued orders that Trump has ignored. There have been deportation flights ordered to turn around. They kept flying anyway. A judge found probable cause for criminal contempt, but nothing really happened to Donald Trump. And J.D. Vance said judges aren't allowed to control the executive's power. And Elon Musk called the judge corrupt and said the judge should be impeached. So there is a lack of respect for the judiciary and for courts that has evolved into open defiance. Now, lower court judges, sometimes I guess maybe you can get away with ignoring them or dismissing it or attacking them if you're at the absolute top of the elites, like the president of the United States is. But what about the Supreme Court? What happens if the law of the land, as handed down by the Supreme Court, says one thing and the president goes, nah, make me? We are going to see the Supreme Court hear a challenge to Donald Trump's tariffs, and they could rule that he is violating the Constitution by seizing congressional taxing power and strike down the entire thing. So imagine that that happens, and then Trump goes, I'm simply not going to comply. Now, we have seen this before. In 1832, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Cherokee Nation, a native group. And Andrew Jackson reportedly said, John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it. And the result was the Trail of Tears, where thousands died and the court had no army, but the president did. What people don't understand is that the Supreme Court doesn't have any special enforcement mechanisms. They depend on the executive branch to enforce their rulings. Federal marshals report to the Justice Department. The Justice Department reports to Trump. So how does a Supreme Court that normally depends on the executive and the Justice Department to enforce their rulings, how does the Supreme Court get their rulings enforced when they are about what those very institutions are doing? If the Supreme Court issues a ruling and Trump says, I disagree, I'm not going to follow it, who enforces the court's decision? I don't know that there is anyone. Republican Congress will just shrug. Democratic Congress can't do anything because there is no Democratic Congress in the sense that Republicans control it, plus the government is shut down. Or Trump doesn't openly defy the court. He just delays. He goes, yes, right, we're going to do it, but we've got to reinterpret what you mean, and we're going to comply in some nominal way that doesn't really represent the spirit of what the Supreme Court has ruled, and it'll be death by 1,000 bureaucratic cuts. If a president can get away with ignoring the Supreme Court, what is left? Because the court was supposed to be the final check. If the check bounces, there are no more checks. Now, this is not like an abstract constitutional debate. This affects people. The immigrant family that won their court case but gets deported anyway, that's a very real impact. A federal worker who won a wrongful termination suit but doesn't get their job back, that is a tangible impact. People being hurt by tariffs and the Supreme Court goes, no, you can't do it. And then they happen anyway. They are still hurt by the tariffs. The other aspect of this that I think is important to wonder about is if the president can ignore the Supreme Court, what about everybody else? And what I mean by that is, what is a court ruling worth at the end of the day if people don't actually have to follow it? Foreign leaders are also paying attention to this. Why would people invest trillions in the U.S. economy? Well, they trust our legal system. They trust courts and their ability to enforce contracts. They protect property rights. They provide stability. Judges already warned this is going to cripple the reputation of the United States if anybody is able to get away with ignoring court rulings, even if it is the president, because when trust evaporates, foreign investment will dry up. The dollar will weaken, 401ks will tank. And it won't be because of tariffs or inflation as a primary cause. It'll be because nobody trusts the country anymore. And trust is already in short supply under Donald Trump. You look at Hungary, you look at Turkey, you look at how other democracies have become dictatorships. This is often the path. It's not tanks. It's the erosion of institutional authority. If courts can't enforce the law, power is all that matters. And maybe Trump's got the power. Now, constitutional scholars are saying, oh, yeah, this is a nightmare scenario. And we are living through it in slow motion right now. Andrew Jackson proved a president kind of can ignore the Supreme Court if Congress allows them to, if the public doesn't rise up, if nobody makes them pay a price. The Supreme Court is going to be ruling. Trump has already shown he ignores courts. He's already in contempt. He's getting away with it. When he ignores the Supreme Court, what happens next? Is this how it ends? Not with a bang, but with a president saying, make me. And then maybe nobody makes him. We really could be heading towards one of the darkest aspects of this entire authoritarian experiment. And by the way, it's an authoritarian experiment that has failed everywhere else that it has been tried. So where do we go next if that's what happens? Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Send me an email, info@davidpakman.com. Appreciate you watching. Stick around for this next video, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you actually see our uploads. You can also catch the full podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.